The Man in the Alley. It was just past midnight when the clapping started. At first, she thought it was coming from a TV in a neighboring apartment. The sound echoed faintly through the thin walls, soft, irregular applause that didn't make sense at this hour. She paused the show she was watching and listened carefully. Clap, clap, clap. Her stomach tightened. The sound wasn't inside the building, it was outside. Slowly, she stood up and walked toward the window of her bedroom. The alley behind her apartment was narrow and poorly lit, illuminated only by a flickering street lamp that buzzed like a dying insect. She pushed the curtain aside just enough to peek out. That's when she saw him. A man was standing in the middle of the alley, directly below her window. He wasn't moving. He wasn't pacing. He was simply standing there, his head tilted unnaturally upward, staring straight at her window. Her breath caught in her throat. She stepped back immediately, heart racing. Maybe it's a coincidence, she told herself. Maybe he's just passing through. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. The clapping started again. This time it was louder. She glanced at the clock on her phone, 12:41 a.m. Her hands were shaking as she returned to the window, this time forcing herself to look longer. He was still there. Same spot, same posture, same blank stare directed at her window. She noticed details she hadn't before. His clothes looked too light for the weather. The temperature had dropped below freezing that night. He wasn't wearing a jacket. His arms hung stiffly by his sides, and worst of all, he was smiling. Not a friendly smile, a stretched, unnatural grin that made her skin crawl. She backed away and locked the window, even though it was already closed. Her apartment suddenly felt too quiet, too exposed. After pacing the room for several minutes, she grabbed her phone and dialed emergency services. Her voice trembled as she explained the situation. "There's a man outside my window," she whispered. "He's been there for over half an hour. He's just staring." The operator asked for her address, then her description of the man. "I can't really tell his age. Maybe around 30? He's standing in the alley behind my building. He hasn't moved at all." She was told to stay inside, keep all doors locked, and wait. Minutes dragged like hours. From her couch, she heard movement outside, footsteps, voices. Relief washed over her as flashing lights painted the walls red and blue. She dared to look through the blinds again. 2 officers were slowly approaching the alley in their vehicle. As the headlights swept across the narrow road, they stopped suddenly. The man was still there. One officer rolled down the window and shouted for him to move aside. The man didn't respond. They turned the high beams on. That's when both officers froze. The light revealed something horribly wrong. The figure standing in the alley wasn't an adult man at all. It was a young girl, barefoot, wearing a thin dress completely unsuitable for the freezing temperature. Her skin looked pale, almost gray, and her hair hung in messy strands around her face. Her eyes were wide open, unblinking, reflecting the headlights like glass. One officer stepped out of the car, shouting again for her to step back. That's when she moved. Not away, toward them. Her movements were jerky, unnatural, like her joints didn't bend correctly. Her smile widened impossibly as she began clapping again, slow, deliberate applause echoing through the alley. Clap, clap, clap. The officers immediately retreated, shouting for her to stop. One of them reached for his radio, voice shaking as he called for backup. Suddenly, the girl let out a sound that wasn't quite a scream and wasn't quite laughter. Then, just as abruptly as it began, she turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness at the far end of the alley. By the time additional units arrived, she was gone. Search teams combed the area for hours. No footprints, no signs of forced entry, no missing persons matching her description. The woman was advised to stay elsewhere for the night. She never returned to that apartment. Weeks later, she learned something that still haunts her. Residents of the building mentioned that the alley had a reputation. Over the years, multiple people had reported seeing someone standing there late at night, always looking up at the windows, always clapping, and every witness described the same thing. At first, it looked like a man, until the light hit just right.